This is Jessica.
And this is Kelly. And this is the Chasing Brighter
podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our book club. Today, we are talking about The Good Life, Lessons from the World's Longest Scientific Study of Happiness by Robert Waldinger and Marc Schulz. Enjoy.
How's your stress levels today?
Oh, Jess, I did my alpha stim this morning, which is I feel like my anxiety is really unusually high right now because of our kitchen renovation. And then, reading this book, The Good Life, it made me realize like all my anxiety and all the things I worry about and spend so much emotion are so trivial. And I don't know how to make them trivial in my mind. So right. I think what set me off was the kitchen renovation has been going well up to this point, and it's been good and it's been fun. And I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad.
And you're a month in.
We're 2 months in. We're 2 months in. And it really is coming to it's to the point now it'll be about by the end of this week, we'll be able to move back in the kitchen, basically. I mean, there's a lot of finishing thing. There's still more work to be done, but the main thing is I can cook back in a kitchen again. So it's been 2 months of me living in the basement cooking. But so like the thing that's challenging is, so we ordered appliances a year ago, and the appliance install is 7 weeks lead time. And so we had to pick a date. And I didn't pick 7 weeks. I picked 8 weeks. So I thought, well, 7 weeks might be aggressive. I knew we had vacation mixed in there. I picked the date 8 weeks out. And our GC, who we've worked with for other projects, this is actually our third project with him. They don't like to commit to a specific date, but everything we've been making really great progress. And it seemed like that was going to be the thing. But I felt like in the last, they come in hot and heavy and they're always there and they're doing a lot of work. And then as it gets later and later, they just less and less because they probably start another job, right? Because they're trying to keep their like pipeline going because they never stop working. And anyway, so he was coming in like once a week or twice a week. And then he's got his plumber, electrician. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all coming in and out. So the GC is not doing a whole lot of anything. And I don't think he does. So the person that we work with doesn't do a whole lot of anything else. He just coordinates and he has great relationships with other people. But we're getting to the final stretch. And so Brian and I have done everything we can to not be the bottleneck, right? We're going to need appliance handles to install on the appliance. Okay. I'm literally in the shuttle in Cancun calling the store to place an order to make sure we can get appliance pulls ready for when they deliver this week, So it's like everything Brian and I are doing, like nothing to get in the way. And then we ordered stone. We had the stone guy come out. Anyway, maybe that started off too, because I did write the stone guy a hot check because I moved money around to the wrong place, which created me having a notification from Chase Bank that my check was returned. And I was like, that was last week. So that was probably that began my downward spiral. Brian was like annoyed, but like, whatever, then that starts my own like self-compassion where I'm like, I can't manage anything. But then like I get a call on Sunday from the GC being like, I just got a call from the stone guy and the stone is too much moisture in it. And it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get the countertops in this week. And they told me they had to have countertops in before appliances were delivered. And so I was really annoyed that he told me that because we've been in direct contact with the stone guy who was like, everything's fine. Everything's fine. He's an amazing guy. We absolutely love him. He's awesome.
Stone guy said it's fine. Contractor said no.
Yeah. So my initial thought was this makes sense because the contractor, he doesn't want to stress out about anything. So he's going to say, we're not going to get those in. Maybe, see if you can push out the appliance date because, we really want to get the countertops in. And I'm like, we can't push out the appliance date. Like, I don't know if we can. I don't think we can. And so I hate having difficult conversations. I hate telling people what they don't want to hear. And I was so emotional and I really kept it in check. And I was like, listen, I'm very disappointed in this information. And I said, I have a lot of anxiety because it's my understanding that we can't move this installation date. It has to be this date. And I don't want to wait another 7 weeks. So we're going to have to figure this out. And he's like, well, then he's like thinking out loud over the phone, which is really annoying because guess what? I'm not a carpenter and I'm not a contractor and I don't know how things work. Just figure it out. It always works out on HGTV. So I was really mad. And I'm like sitting in the parking lot of like Whole Foods because I also had like spent 2 minutes looking for a parking spot because it was really crowded. And I was probably like, oh my God, why did I even come to Whole Foods on a Saturday or Sunday? That was stupid. And so I was like, well, I'll call the appliance company to see if I can reschedule the date. And I'll let you know. And he's like, well, we're going to come. Oh, and my van's broken. So we're not going to be able to come on Monday. We're going to come on Tuesday. So then my anxiety was at an all-time high. I need things to work out the way they need to work out. And when they don't, I flip out. And it's stuff I can't control. This goes back to the book. Talks about the fact that we spend so much time on the things we can't control versus the things we can. So I'm really looking forward to being 80 at this point because I know I'll have better perspective. But now I'm in my midlife. I am at the height of controlling. Right. That was the thing that was fascinating about the book. So anyway, I know this is a long story, but I called the appliance company yesterday and guess what? Their next date, May 11th. Now, although that is my birthday, whoop, whoop, I do not want appliances then. And so I was like, I'm not waiting another 4 weeks for appliances. So
can the appliances be delivered and just sitting in the middle of the kitchen or what?
Well, yeah, but then the contractor doesn't want to install them because
yeah, but that's their problem. They can install it.
He doesn't want to.
No, but is it? Yeah, well.
So then I'd have to reschedule the guys to come back to do the install. So anyway, I know I ended the call and I was pissed and he just texted me right away. He was like, keep the date. So I called, even though I called to try to move it, I can't. So I talked to him yesterday. Anyway, I know it was push comes to shove. And when people really end up getting pushed and I really gave them that hard time, they're figuring it out, right? The stone guy came last night. They put the sink in. They're laying the stone today. Like they weren't going to do that before because they're all super duper paranoid about moisture being inside of the stone, which they said then was a really low risk. And I'm like, I don't know these things. How do you know when people are telling you crap to make it convenient for them or when they're legitimately telling you something that you believe?
Right.
That was kind of where I was at too, just being frustrated with the whole thing.
Yeah.
Anyway. So I think it's the pit of despair of a renovation. And if we're recording this, then I can revisit this and be like, oh my God, you worried for like absolutely no reason.
I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but Dominic's birthday was the end of our renovation. And we had every single thing ready, but we were waiting on the appliances being delivered. And then they brought the wrong appliance.
Oh, yeah.
And it was not my fault. It was her fault. It was a letter off because now there's black stainless steel and regular stainless steel. And so they brought in black stainless steel. And I would say when there is installation, because we were having a range, a double oven, and a microwave installed, they have we did stainless steel, so they have pieces of stainless steel that they come and they frame around the whole thing, so it looks like it just fits perfect, but they have different sizes and stuff. So I was super, super pissed. And then if I would have had them reorder it, it would have been 6 weeks to have an oven. And then we were coming on to Thanksgiving and Christmas and all of the things. And so what I did is I found that Home Depot had the fridge. And so the difference would be when you go through these higher end appliance dealers, you have a lifetime warranty and white glove service. Anytime you have an issue, you can call the place that you went to and they take care of it. So I was giving all of that up by ordering through Home Depot, and it's still in Home Depot. It was 3 days.
The same oven.
Yes, exact same oven. And the guys were like, your house is different because your kitchen's closed off, right? But my kitchen was by this point totally open, and you're seeing the guys every day and you're talking to them every day. And they knew that I wanted the oven in by Dominic's birthday, and all were like, oh. And so I was like, can you guys install the oven? Can you do it? And so we had them, they delivered the oven, they delivered into the garage. And then they came. Once it was delivered, I texted them and said that it's here. And then they installed it and just charged me like $100 or something, or $150, $100. But I was like, can one of your guys come over and do it? And they were like, we can do it. Because I know I'm not like, it's not like contradicting. I'm like, can't you just like plug the oven in? Can someone just come? Because they had to lift it up because we have a double oven over a drawer. So clearly it wasn't anything I could physically do. But it was like, is it that hard? Can someone just come plug, just plug it in?
Well, I mean, there's a whole separate drama with our.
I'm just saying they're like, no, we need an oven person or whatever. And I'm just like, what? Anyway.
Well, I know it's very frustrating. I can see why, like, I might change my mind, but I definitely see the benefit of like not building at this point, right? Or like having somebody. I think there's a lot of variables with this reno. One is that we were working with a designer up until this point, and then we don't have that buffer because she's had a baby and like keeping her baby alive. So
you guys are managing the project. Like when we had our kitchen done, we did nothing. Like we had to do a lot of meetings and make a lot of decisions, but we didn't manage the project. And I've managed a project before, and that is more stressful because you have to be in the know.
I hate stress, and I need to figure out how to like, if I could not be stressed out in these moments, I would be much more effective.
But if we can tie it all into the book, right? If we start talking about the book.
Yeah, let's start talking about the book.
So they talk about facing the difficulties versus avoidance. Those who avoid difficulties versus facing them head on fare much worse. So everyone faces obstacles, but those who have a support network or who are able to get through them and know what to do. So it's all about a support network. And so when you want to minimize, avoid, or compartmentalize it, you're doing the opposite to help you. So it's like, instead of trying to do all these things to avoid your anxiety, they say just face it and allow yourself to feel the feelings. Mm-hmm. And so one of the stories, and we can kind of get into the background of the study, but one of the stories I loved was the story of Abigail versus Lucia. So they both found a lump in their breasts. Abigail decided not to tell anybody and that it wasn't a big deal and do anything about it and ignore it and put her head in the sand. And Lucia immediately told her husband. She called her adult children and she made a doctor's appointment. And Abigail died. And Lucia ended up getting treatment and surviving. And it was breast cancer for both of them.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Very crazy. And so it's just like facing it and engaging your support system. So when you were just saying, I don't know, like it sounds like maybe your go-to is to not tell anybody and try to figure it out yourself.
No, I call Brian and complain. So, I mean, Brian's been really great. I think the good part about this is I do have a good support system with Brian in particular. Getting through this, and he's so busy with work that he thinks a lot of this stuff is just like noise and not a big deal. And so that's what I need right now, is that I need somebody to be like, this is not a big deal. Our kitchen is going to get done when it gets done. And he was sort of like, I would like it to get done sooner than later, but it is what it is. And it's very true at this point that, it's not a big deal, but I just want it done.
I think that doesn't validate. So like if Wes comes home and is crying because he gets an F, you saying it's not a big deal doesn't make his feelings go away. So I feel like the work, maybe I'm wrong. So my example right now of why I'm stressing, which is just the dumbest thing ever, is high school softball. So I've made a commitment starting yesterday to not talk about it. And I talked to Jana, our Reiki healer, about it yesterday, not about softball, but that I call it like getting wrapped up in humanity. And I told her that I was really wrapped up in humanity and having a difficult time letting things go. And so that's my new thing. And so it's kind of like, instead of like, I guess with the renovation, instead of like asking yourself, or telling yourself, I've got to get over this. This is dumb and stupid. It's kind of like, well, why is this triggering for me? Or why is this bothering me? And that's what I'm doing with softball. Like, why am I so bothered and why am I so triggered? And so for you, you're saying it's triggering helplessness or like a lack of control. And so it's like, what's that about? And then how can I move toward acceptance and let it go? And it's like, for me, with the whole softball stuff, it's like, why am I so angry about it? Why, you know what I mean? And it's like, what's going on there? And how can I work through it and let it go?
I visualized this morning that like emotional weight I feel with it and like the tightness in my chest, that anxiety. I know it's anxiety, it's like letting that go, you know? And so I just need to, I think for me with this is I would feel so much more freer without that emotional weight I'm giving it, right? And so I'm trying to let that go. I think that's, you know, working with Jan and even on doing meditation when you're in those moments where you just, I feel it lighter, right? You just feel like the weight goes away. And so I think today I did a lot of work on that. And even this conversation maybe will help, but I'm hoping by the end of the day, I will feel lighter about
it. But it's a process. And she told me, just by the way, that the energy is volatile and crazy right now. And that checks with my clients, with myself, of just things being crazy. Also, and I want to tap into the study for a second, and then I want to say something about. So basically, the book that we read is about this study that originated in 1938. Okay. It started in Boston, where two researchers chose 200 Harvard sophomore men who they thought were going to have a successful future. At the same time, there was another study of a lawyer and a social worker where they chose 450 boys who were living in inner city Boston, kind of in the tenements of Boston, who were not delinquents. And they wanted to know what life factors prevent delinquency. So the studies began separately, but they joined very early on to become one study. It has maintained an 84% participation rate over 84 years, which is incredibly high for a longitudinal study. This is the longest longitudinal study in the history of the world and is continuing to go on. And the authors are aware that the original participants were all white men. And so in order to try to make it more relevant to today and to everyone, they've cross-referenced other longitudinal studies and talk about them a lot in the study on here was a study of women, here is a study of whatever, and also how the study has now become more diversified with more genders, more race and ethnicities, and not just, kind of heterosexual people, but, trying to have more LGBTQIA plus people in the study. That's just kind of how it's naturally and organically progressed. So that's fascinating.
I totally agree. And I think the part, and I'll try to articulate this well, because I'm not good at this, but my intention is there, which is what I found to be so incredibly profound is we love to read books and we love to read stories about people. And a lot of the stories and books we read are all fictional. And this research is about like people's real lives. And like, I love an epic novel. I love a multi-generational novel and like
The Goldfinch.
Yeah. And this study is like real life tracking of people's lives and like what they went through when they were 14 and then they joined the military and then they got married and then they retired and then they had kids and their kids' struggles and their kids' lives and just every stage and just this sort of like culmination of every life stage and like where people are. And, the thing I thought was fascinating is where you and I are and all the kind of troubles and challenges we have is like midlife. We're in midlife. We're right. We're on level. But I mean, it's like everyone's experiencing these trials and tribulations now in this midlife thing. But I found it so in a lot of ways, a lot of the stories were very emotional for me because I was like, it just pulled at the heartstrings. Like you just hear about people's stories and to know that they were okay in the end. Everybody is okay.
No, they were not.
Well, some of them weren't, but some of them were. Most of them were.
It was like, I would say it was pretty even on who was unhappy and who was happy. And that's how that you could compare. So you could hear this one person's life. So they, and just to tell you what they did, every 2 years they mailed a survey. Every 5 years they got complete medical records, and every 15 years they went and interviewed the subjects, and they were able to share the names and stories of some of the people. So they would say, this is the happiest person of the study, and this is the unhappiest person of the study, based on interviews and reporting. And so I would, if you were just going to totally summarize the entire study and just pull out right away a few sentences, it would say the simplest way to sum up the 84-year study would be that good relationships make us healthier and happier. People who are connected to family, friends, or neighbors are healthier and happier than their contemporaries who are less connected and more isolated than they want to be.
And
so those
help
people
us
have
live
shorter
longer.
lives. Yeah. Yep. And a study has shown that 1 in 4 Americans identify as lonely, and people who are isolated and lonely live a shorter life. People who are more socially connected are at less risk of dying any year of their life. So it's not an age thing. It's not like, 84-year-old lonely people die. No, if you're lonely, if you're isolated, you're more at risk of dying, period. Any age. So that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I would say why it makes a sense. Like, they really get into attachment a lot in some of the stories. So the one story of the guy who was very strange. He was living like on a trailer 200 miles away from his wife. He was married, but he said, he was like very unhappy, but he reported being very close to his children, and he did not want to get a divorce to hurt the children, but his children lived thousands of miles away. He did not visit his children or see his children, and had contact with like one person a day. And if you look at his history, when he was born, his 9-year-old sister helped deliver him. Shortly after his birth, the father put the mother in the sanitarium, very unclear why, in a sanitarium. And so the 9-year-old sister basically raised him as a baby. Mom came home, had a connection with the mom. Then the dad put the mom in the sanitarium again. And I don't know. And then the dad died. And while the mom was in the sanitarium the rest of her life. And so he was adopted out and lost contact with his sister, Rosemary, who he had the connection with, and he bonded with his adopted mother. But after that, there was no connection. So you can look at, for him, for safety and survival, connection was not safe. And so that was really sad. Mm-hmm. That went through the rest of his life of not wanting, of just not being able to be connected to people. So
but then there's the flip side of the great stories, right? About people young men who grew up with, the story of the guy whose dad walked out when he was young, and the mom and the siblings had to kind of make ends meet. Everybody worked and contributed to the household. They sent him to school, and then he eventually dropped out and just seemed like he had a rough going in the beginning, and then joined the military, became very effective, didn't respond to the survey for many years because he was like traveling the world in a military post, and led a very fulfilling life later in life, because he, had the experiences he had. And he had, I think, to your point about connection, right? He had his sisters and his mother continue to be an important part of his life. And they even talked about the fact that he married later in life, and how, everybody in a lot of ways is on their own path and their own journey. And, not everybody has to hit these certain milestones at certain parts in their life, because every aspect of your development has to be fulfilled eventually. I thought that part was interesting.
It was
too.
On time versus off time in the life cycle. So he was off time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, right? And sometimes I feel like we get caught up with that as well, right? About you need to be married or have kids or all those things on time, instead of, letting it happen when it's ready.
Yeah. And then there were people who did have a traumatic childhood. It wasn't like they were not connected to family necessarily, but were able to find connection with a life partner that helped them continue to be successful.
Yeah.
Or was interesting to me, like they compared Leo and John. Leo was the happiest person in the study. John was the unhappiest person in the study. So they both were Harvard graduates. John, and they both kind of came from affluent families. They both served in the war. While Leo was gone in the war, his father died, and he always wanted to be a writer. And when he came home, the mother found out she had Parkinson's. So he had to give up his dream of being a writer, became a school teacher to help provide for all of his family. John came back, didn't want to join the family business, became a lawyer, and was one of the most successful people in the study. And so what I found so fascinating was they asked them, they said, a man feels good when blank. And John responded, he is able to respond to inner drives. And Leo responded, he senses that his family loves him despite everything. So what are your thoughts on that? That John, the unhappiest, most successful man in the story, said that a man feels good when he is able to respond to inner drives. What are your thoughts on that?
It's sad, right? I mean, I think it's unfortunate because it was very clear in the study that, John wasn't happy. What I also, just to follow up on that, what is the other thing that really grabbed me in this whole book is that you're seeing actual responses from these participants at different stages in their life, and these honest, true, vulnerable of what they're saying, and it's written, right? It's not everybody.
They were in cursive. They had to go back and look over their handwritten and cursive responses.
Everybody answered A on this response. It's their actual what comes to mind, right? The fact that he basically was whatever I'm able to accomplish versus being surrounded by loved ones.
Well, but I feel it's that would make sense. You would think, I'm unhappy. Let me do all of these things and achieve goals to make myself happy. Does that make sense? I think from the outside, for a lot of people, that would make sense. I'm unhappy, so I'm going to go do all these things.
You have to do something. Yeah.
Your inner drive. I'm following my inner drive to be happy. I think that sounds
like a valid point.
Right. But then Leo is he senses that his family loves him despite everything. So what I pull from that is he feels loved unconditionally.
Yes, absolutely.
I would say that John is probably, now that we're talking, an achiever. That sounds so like an achiever, right?
Oh,
You're worthy based on accomplishment. And Leo is saying you're worthy based on being accepted by others. Anyways, I just really thought that was really fascinating because I do see in my practice a lot of people who are incredibly successful, right? But struggling with fulfillment and happiness. And so it just goes to show you it's about connection, right? Leo didn't have money. Leo was a school teacher, and he continually said no to promotions because he enjoyed being a school teacher. So there's no way he made a lot of money.
They talked about the other study that they kind of linked to that, which was a 2010 study about how much money. So the need for money and happiness and what that threshold is. And they talked about $75,000 a year for a household was the number that once you had that,
people thought that if you had that, you'd be
once
happy?
You had that amount of money, largely you had everything you needed. But people who even had less than that were happier. We're per capita happier because money doesn't bring happiness, right?
But hands down, when people say what would make you happy, people say money.
Yes,
all the time. And there was another study that a woman did on, I don't know if it was Asian refugees or immigrants, and it was people that were able to be successful and get through it and be happy were people that had one stable adult in their life. So they went back through and compared their study to that study and found that to be true, that the people that were successful had one stable adult in their life. So that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was fascinating. There was, when you talk about the life cycle, they had kind of a section about teenagers. And it said, I don't know, I put in my notes, the book also explores the importance of connection and role models for teenagers. As you know, the original intent of a study was to see what prevented youth in low-income areas from being delinquent. And they found the connection with adults, their parents, and even siblings to be critical. The balance between allowing an adolescent to be independent, but also be there to support them was really pivotal. So that was interesting. As I have a teen and preteen in my house, you know?
I agree. Linking to that too, what I loved was the section on social media.
Yeah.
And, the title of it even was Don't Scroll, Engage. And really kind of using social media as a positive thing, right? Mm-hmm. So it was talking about when you are using social media, does it fill you with joy? Does it energize you, or does it deplete you? And if it depletes you, it's not for good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it gave a lot of tips on what to do about social media. And I think that's helpful just with teens in particular, or like kids when we're working with them on social media. And like social media isn't evil, right? Obviously we're recording a podcast, so we like social media, but it's the fact that how, using it for good, right? And that it's not going away anytime soon. And
I think both parents, all ages, need to notice how you feel when you're scrolling. And I think we need to pay attention that research after research after research supports that social media can be positive if you are commenting, interacting. And if you are just looking, you feel worse after. And so if you're engaging in it, cultivate it. And then, it has positive benefits, but how does it negatively impact children during their formative years? And the research is unclear as to whether the social skills you develop online can compete with those you develop in person. Right. And so being in the same room as a person, they just talk about human touch and physical proximity have emotional, psychological, and biological effects.
Well, and they went through, that link through COVID, right? They actually had grabbed some insights about during the shutdown and how just that people were like, what's the skin hunger? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Where people just crave like just being touched by another person and just having that personal connection was an important factor.
And I think I liked the tips. So the book was full of a lot of great tips. And I like the tips that they said, set aside distraction-free time with your social relationships. So maybe what you can do is they said, just have phone-free dinner. Or try to have a day where no one has their phones, or look that way you can have more like an improved connection with the people in your life.
Yes.
And I loved the other tip that said periodically, and they gave a chart, a blank chart to fill this out, but write the top 10 connections, like the people that you interact with the most. And then look at those relationships and explore, do these relationships energize me? And if those relationships energize you, how can you show appreciation to that person? If it's not a very energizing interaction or relationship, can you make that relationship more energizing? Explore what to do with relationships that are energy depleting. So it's kind of like cleaning house. And it's like, hey, I notice every time I see this person, my emotions are depleted. Is there a way to make it more energizing? And if not, what can you do? So I really liked that recommendation of consistently kind of reviewing the energy of those relationships.
There was an excerpt in the book I thought was really fascinating and related to that, which is it talked about the present moment is large and spacious if we allow it to be. Even when it contains sad and scary experiences, this moment includes so much more than the content of our minds. The sense of being truly alive comes with giving our attention only to what is happening right in front of us. To grab hold of sensations, the feelings of our bodies, the things we see and hear, the presence of the people who are with us, and using them to make a hard left out of thinking about other things and places, and to emerge from the tunnel of our own minds into the vastness of the present, the only place anything or anyone really exists.
Yeah. They talk a lot about John Kabat-Zinn, and he's the one that kind of brought mindfulness to the States. And his quote, do you remember that? Like, his quote was in the book that we read, Self-Compassion. Like, instead of trying to control the waves, learn how to surf.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is, I think, really profound for me and my challenges.
Well, I think what it reminds me of is when I say lost in humanity, I am so wrapped up in my own shit, and you're so wrapped up in your own shit, then how can you be present for the people in your life? And so, we lost our friend Mary, Teresa, who was on the podcast. Unfortunately, her sister Mary passed away a few weeks ago. Mary was really just an incredible human, only 52 years old. And going to her memorial, it was like insane. So she was a crusader. One of her sons was bullied, and no one was responding appropriately. And Mary became a huge advocate, and she is not solely, but one of the people responsible for Haley's Law here in Nevada, where we have bullying laws and procedures and systems set up now for CCSD because of Mary's advocacy work. Mary literally, they told a story where she literally gave her jacket to someone who was like homeless and cold, and she literally just took off her jacket and was like, I could buy a new one, and gave it to her. And Mary was just like so giving and so wonderful. Mm-hmm. And it's like, where was I in Mary's last few moments? Where was I the last 6 months, the last year of Mary's life, wrapped up in my own shit? And it's just like, okay, I have these people in my life who do energize me, but am I showing appreciation for them? Am I engaging with them? Am I scheduling time with them? They talk about change your schedule to spend more time with relationships.
Yes.
Because people at the end of their life wish they would have spent more time with their loved ones. And so to me, the death of my friend, our friend, has made me realize, like, WTF am I doing with my time? Like, what is happening? So it's like for you with the kitchen, you know what I mean? It's like if one of your friends dies tomorrow and you spent your day like looking at countertops. You know what I mean? It's just you're like, what the hell? And so it's like, how can you be more present in the moment, trying to purposely be with your loved ones and spend time with those who energize you?
Yeah, I love that. And, when I was reading that, part of the book, I thought about how I really have tried to make 2023 a year of connection. And I've reached out to, from a work perspective, former colleagues. And maybe we can use this as a segue into the work environment topics too, with work relationships. But, I work, aside from, our Chasing Brighter efforts, my other company, I work independently a lot, and I work on teams, but I don't have I work remotely. I don't have people every day. And so I was really feeling that loneliness. Mm-hmm. And so I really tried to reach out to former colleagues, and I've had a fantastic time just reconnecting with people. It's never too late to reconnect with people. And, in the book, when it talked about the different tiers of friendships, right? Like intimate friendships, people you call to cry on their shoulder, close friends that you enjoy sharing laughs with and have common interests, and then your casual friends, and just thinking through those for myself and really trying to reconnect with, people who I worked very closely with and I just lost touch with, which has been really fun, and it energizes me. It energizes me because I think what it also makes me realize is I have a lot in common with other people too. It feels good when it's part of that, like fighting the loneliest thing, where you feel, that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And other people are in the same boat as you, even though you don't see them or talk to them every day.
It was fascinating. Again, I don't know if they just made up a case study or I don't know if they made that up or it was actual case study of that woman that was at work. You know what I'm talking about? The woman that was, there was a woman and she was at work and she was just dumped on all the time with work and her boss would cut out early and she stayed over 2 to 3 hours every day just to get stuff done. She would come home and they would already have eaten dinner and she loved cooking but never had a chance to cook dinner with anybody. And she came to work one day and she heard this guy who had a cubby next to hers who she didn't really ever talked to kept sighing. And she was like, what's going on? He was like, I was in a car accident and my car doesn't work now and it's going to be way too much to fix. It kind of drives and my roommate's giving me a ride, but I don't know what to do. And she was like, oh my gosh, my husband's a mechanic, bring it over and like we can do it super cheap for you, like we'll totally take care of it. And then they started talking. He was 15 years younger than her and she thought they had nothing in common. And she started talking about how slow this program was at work and he was like, oh, let me fix it. And he ended up saving her hours. And then she ended up leaving work early that day. And then they got to talking about ways that they could improve efficiency at work. And it was just like making that one connection. Oh, and then he brought her home, brought her fresh sourdough bread the next day. And she was like, I didn't know he was a baker. And just the one connection, how it improved her quality of life, had her leave work early, set better boundaries, be home for her family more. And so it's just like looking at that, and you're right. It's just like with so many people working remote now, you're not going to get those daily interactions. And so then you're going to have to create them.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, we did over COVID. I had a group of colleagues that we had a weekly talk to talk about case studies and stuff. And it wasn't just necessarily because of COVID, but it happened during COVID. And I really missed that. And I wish we could all get back together. We all have very different schedules right now. So it's difficult to make work. But I love that. Like I'm going to, you mentioned Alpha STEM. We didn't really talk too much about Alpha STEM, but basically Alpha STEM is a device that you can get from a provider in the States, and it helps reduce anxiety, insomnia, and depression. If you clip up to it, it's cranial electrotherapeutic stimulation. And so I am actually going to an Alpha STEM lunch on Friday, and that is how I connect. And I am really excited about it. And they're not very often. Maybe we'll have more, but like that's a way to connect. By going to a business dinner one time, I ended up making friends with 3 people who are my friends now.
Yeah.
So, you know, we may not feel like going to those things, but if you're a solopreneur, you know, putting yourself out there sometimes does help create connections. And like those connections are important. For instance, anytime I need help trying to find a referral, I reach out to those 3 people and they always have really incredible referrals for me. Jess,
I've done the same thing. I attended a webinar back in February on a software application that I work with called HubSpot. And I'm a partner, but I'm one person. And I joined it because I was like, I was slow and I just got to do this. And they put us in a breakout group during this webinar. And we just had to like go around and kind of do a roundtable intros. And it was all women who were entrepreneurs. And most of us were just one woman shows, but we were really interested in this technology and getting involved in it. And it was so random. And we're all at different stages, but we're a tribe now, and we meet once a month to kind of connect and share ideas and talk about what we're trying to do and where we're going and really kind of be each other's support. So yeah, I agree. And it's one of those where you put yourself out there and you never know what is in store. And sometimes it's a bust, but sometimes it's not, and you're getting something out of it. But there is something from that. All connections have benefits. And so they had a study of people where they were like, okay, you're going to go ride the train. You know, people commute on the train and they're like, yes. You said if people talk to a stranger, you said if people don't talk to a stranger, and none of them wanted to talk to a stranger. And the people who talked to a stranger reported a better mood than those that didn't. So even if you don't come away with a long-term connection, just interacting with others has benefits. Yeah, that was on the L. It was a University of Chicago study. Yeah. And it made me think about riding on an airplane, right? I used to travel a lot by myself, and just you strike up a conversation with somebody and you just kind of keep. I still don't want to talk to somebody on the airplane. I'm like, yeah, that's nice. I still don't want to talk to somebody on an airplane. I bet you have. What would enter? Oh, I have. Yeah. But it's like, what would
I would say I'm probably part of the study and I'm wrong, but it would be like, what would energize me more? It would be like, oh my gosh, reading a book or streaming a show because I'm never alone. And but you're right, I probably would report a better mood. But that also reminds me of the book that we did for our book club in January on how to be well and the importance of connection.
Yes.
And it totally lines up. Like all of these, like the Bible, Buddhism, all of these ancient religions have quotes about the importance of the whole person and the whole being and the importance of connection for our well-being. And to remember, some of this report, they're getting medical records. Right. And so John, who was really successful, had a slew of medical and health issues. So that's so fascinating. Like isolation, loneliness, poor health. That's just fascinating.
So I know we're coming up at a wrap up. I wanted to talk about a couple more things. One is it talks through the WISER model, which is a model of reacting to emotionally challenging situations and relationship events. And I think we'll talk through this more in the blog post and really go through the diagram. But I wanted to talk about it because yesterday my anxiety has been high. And so I'm not the best parent. And I was making dinner and Wes, my oldest, had disappeared. And he's been coming into my office watching TV, whatever, doing stuff on his own when he isn't. I've asked him to do something else. And so I was making dinner and I looked down the hallway because I live in the basement and I went and I saw that my office door was closed and I assumed it was Wes. And so I yelled, "Wes, turn the TV off and get out of my office." And I could almost cry. I feel like such an asshole. He opened the door to the laundry room and he was doing the laundry. I mean, he was doing dishes. Yeah. Sorry, we're going to have to redo that.
No, we don't. Cry. You can be vulnerable. So I felt like such a jerk. He's never washed the dishes. He's never. And so I was like, he was like so mad at me. And I was like, "I'm sorry, this is unexpected behavior. I didn't know you were going to be washing the dishes." But like, I obviously need to use the WISER model because I was mad at you.
Oh, yeah. I seriously hurt his feelings. I think he thought he was doing something nice. And here I'm like screaming down his throat.
Right. My preteen 12-year-old doesn't like me right now. Just so you know, Kelly, part of that is just not that he did anything, but like I was helping with his ancient China report and I was reading the rubric and he was just like yelling at me that I don't understand. And he printed a picture and it had buildings in it. And I was like, it shows you're supposed to be doing ancient China. And there's skyscraper in this diorama picture. And he was like, "Oh, okay. Well, Mom, do you think I can go on Google and find a photo from ancient China? Do you think they had photos back then, Mom?" And I'm like, "Well, do you think we could like whatever it'd be like? You just don't understand. You don't understand. And then Justin walks in the door and Justin's like, "Hey, there's like, I read all the things and it says ancient China. So why don't you just like kind of color in those buildings?" "That's a great idea, Dad. I'm going to do that." What? You know what I mean? And then I was like, "Dom, do you think you could like help with the unload the dishwasher?" You know, it's just like he's just giving it to me.
That's how Wes is eating my soul right now.
It's also like you dump on me emotionally all the time. I think, you know, the important thing is then like, okay, so WISER is watch, interpret, select, engage, reflect. So reflect, right? So you watched, you interpreted wrong. You selected the wrong thing and you engaged, but it's like reflect and be like, "Oh my gosh, you know what, Wes, I am so sorry." I think it's important to show vulnerability to kids and that is supported. And even they talk about this here, those who are vulnerable with other connections, right? There's more intimacy. So to be like, I'm really stressed about the remodel. And when I get stressed, sometimes I have a shorter fuse and I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. Giving him a hug, physical touch, and just kind of moving on. You know what I mean? But I
did that.
Yeah.
And
okay.
And
he's holding a grudge.
He's still pissed off at me for something else. And then like he went to bed and then I was like, "Hey, buddy." Because like I'm assuming again, I thought 12-year-olds like shake it off, right? So he's like
all the time
pouting in bed, and I was like, "Hey, buddy."
I do it all the time, and it's funny that you're saying that.
Is everything else okay? Like, is there anything else going on? And he was like, "No, it's just you."
It's your face and your whole being.
I hate you. So then I was like okay. I'll go back to Becca. Yeah. At least Becca loves me right
I know. Well, I think it's their age because it's like Gabby's past that. And then I was just the other day, Justin and I were having a discussion and it was like something stupid, like our opinion on something. And Dominic was just like, I agree with Dad. He's so team Dad right now. And he was like, everything Dad is saying makes sense. It's like, you know what I mean? It was like Dad. And so I was thinking the other day, I was like, he's so team Dad that if I were going to say anything, not even like negatively about their dad, but let's be like, oh, you know what? He probably got out late or whatever. And he'd be like, Dad wouldn't be late. Dad, you know, and I'm like, okay, yes, I know you love Dad right now. Got it. But we all make mistakes. Again, I just think it's like looking back when we were kids, what our father have said, I am really sorry about that. Here's what's going on with me and I'm going to try to improve.
Yeah.
No. And so that's what I go back
that's
to.
True.
And, I also think just to go through the other two tips I liked, keep a gratitude journal about your partner.
Yes, love that.
When you and your partner and what they call the stuckness, which throughout the life cycle you get in this thing called, they were calling like the stuckness, is that you can step out of those routines and relationships. So do shake it up, plan something different with your partner. And then finally, just like establishing, I found the research on this fascinating, establish regular family dinners. Children who have a regular family dinner have higher self-esteem, better grades, lower drug and alcohol use, and a reduction in teen pregnancy.
That's crazy.
That's fascinating.
Yes.
Totally fascinating.
That's a very interesting fact.
Yes. And so it's like, and I don't think it doesn't say nightly. It didn't say nightly. It says regular family dinners. If you can invite other generations of families, other, people who are older that could, have another thing. So the closer you are to end of life, the less you give a shit, right? About these tiny things like you're talking about. That's why grandparents are more relaxed about the kids, because you're not sweating the small stuff, because you're realizing your life is coming to an end and you're trying to be more mindful and be more in the present. And so to have that influence over your kids, if it's an older neighbor, older grandparents, aunts and uncles, whatever, having that influence on your children is really, really impactful.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole section, right, on family matters. It goes a lot deeper. Also, we talk about just intimate relationships, like your relationship with your partner and how it navigates. And it was just fascinating, even how that relationship evolves and changes with people over their lifespan. That was pretty cool.
And I would say my only complaint against this book, and it's my complaint in all of research, is when they talk about family matters, there's no tips for people who because they talk a lot about how important it is to salvage family relationships and to not sweat the small stuff. But there are times, right, where we cannot have a relationship with our family. There can be drug abuse, alcohol abuse. Let's say you were abused, molested. There are family members that we can no longer, for us, we cannot be healthy and happy with our family and our life. So I would have liked more tips on how to create a family of choice. I would have liked to hear more about that. So if they could, add a new chapter and just, talk about how to cultivate a family of choice, I would have really appreciated that.
That's an interesting perspective. It talked about, in closing, they, for basic education, we talk about the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic. And, it suggested, right, that there really should be the 4 R's and adding relationships as the 4th R, because it talked about, early education is meant to prepare students for life. And they believe that, relationships are just as important as the other items.
And how identifying and expressing emotion is critical in connection.
Yes.
Yeah. If you want to know more about this book as well, Kelly found that the author, Robert Waldinger, has a really great TED Talk. We'll have the link in the show notes. We'll have the link on the blog post, but you can check that out too, to get more of an idea of their research as well.
Yeah. And there's also the adultdevelopmentstudy.org. And we'll definitely put all this as well in our blog post, which is the more detailed analysis on the study.
Thanks for listening and joining us today.
And don't forget to follow us on social media at Chasing Brighter or on our blog, chasingbrighter.com.